Welcome back to Every Horror Film Where Horror Is Forever. And we are still riding the Halloween train, getting here to about the middle part in the series. Halloween H20, 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 20 years later, Halloween 20 years, whatever you want to call it. There's like 10 different titles for this film. Jeff, what's going on, man? How we looking?
Man, we are in the back half of the Halloween franchise. I think we made it through 6 already. We've got, as of the time of this video, 6 to go, not including ends. So we are in the second leg of this, and I got to tell you, man, I don't know if franchise fatigue has set in yet, but we haven't gotten to the worst installments yet. We've gotten to the best, I think, but I don't think we've gotten to the worst. What do you think?
I don't think we've gotten to the worst. Not yet. We've discussed some bad ones, but we haven't gotten to the worst yet. There are still lots of good ones to come as well. But right now, I'm going to focus on Halloween H20. This came out in 1998. This is 20 years after the first Halloween, 1978. And in this movie, if you haven't been paying attention to all of our other fine reviews that you can find on our channel, parts 4, 5, and 6 no longer count in this timeline. If there's one thing you're going to learn about this franchise, is there are multiple timelines, multiple ways you can choose your own adventure. So in this timeline, this picks up 20 years after the original, after Halloween 2, essentially. And our synopsis, our plot is basically, Laurie Strode has moved away from Haddonfield, still in Illinois, or no, she's in California. Sorry, I was thinking the beginning of the film. She's in California now. She changed her name. She's now the principal of this like private academy. She has a kid who's about 17 years old. She has, a completely new life, and not a lot of people know that. And a good amount of this film is her trying to overcome that trauma and still living with what happened 20 years ago. Jeff, your initial thoughts on H20, anything you want to touch on, preface before we get into this review?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to touch on is a lot of people make the joke about how confusing the timelines are in the Halloween franchise. Like, oh, I'm confused. How many Halloween 2s are there going to be? Is this another one? What happened to the 2007 one? First of all, shut up. It's not that confusing. It really isn't. All right. You just wanted to make a very easy and hack joke. So once you're able to get past that, you get Halloween H20, which they got so far down the Thorn trilogy, they really had nowhere else to go. They said, you know what, back to square one, where it worked. Halloween 1 and 2. People want to know what happened after that. They don't want to know about Jamie. They don't want to know about Rachel or Thorn or any of that. So what you have is 20 years after 1978. So we're in 1998 now. Laurie's grown with her grown 17-year-old son. I will say right off the bat, I saw this movie as a kid, obviously, but I really didn't watch it that much more. Watching it for this review, I was very surprised about two things. Two things I found very surprising about this movie. Number one, I always made the joke that Halloween 2018 was like Halloween H40, like 40 years later.
Correct.
I always made that joke because they already did the reboot thing. I never realized just how much 2018 borrowed from H20. I always knew there were some aspects of it, but man, rewatching this, I'm like, dude, 2018 took all the best plays from this playbook and brought it back to 2018. So I was very surprised about that. The second thing that surprised me about this movie, honestly, is how much I enjoyed it. Honestly, it was not bad. I don't know. Are you of the same opinion?
I have had a weird relationship with this movie. The first time I really saw it, the first couple times I saw it, I really did enjoy it because when I was younger, I was like, oh, it's got Jamie Lee Curtis in it. So, it's got to be, good. So, I really enjoyed it. I thought the story was okay. And then once I started to really get into the franchise and understand what I liked, what I didn't like, I really started to dislike this film a lot. The more and more I watched it, the less I liked it. So I was kind of in the middle. Upon viewing it this time, I will say that I actually, for the most part, I did enjoy most of this movie. Is it the best Halloween sequel? No, it's not. Is it the worst Halloween sequel? No, it's not. But if you look at this from the perspective when it came out in 1998 and you look at it now, we'll start with 98. When it first came out, it's it was a good sequel. It was a definitive sequel and a definitive end to the original first few films, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it. It's maybe a little dated here and there in certain aspects, filmed in the late 90s. But as I've watched it, the story it's basic, it's fine. It's what they do in Halloween 2018 essentially, but in a different way. But I do like the story. You've got some decent characters. And yeah, there's some bad things I'm gonna say about Michael Myers in this review, but for the most part, I do like what they do in this movie. In the ending, even though it's not the real ending, the ending at the time is probably the best ending to any Halloween film other than the original. I would say I think it's a very definitive, very conclusive ending that should have stuck but we will get into that later on in this review and the next one.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, it definitely it's very hit or miss for people. And in 1998, I mean, obviously we weren't grown enough to go see it in the theaters at that time, but the people who did, the general audiences, they had a bad taste in their mouth, man. I mean, 3 years prior, you had Halloween 6, which we know is just horrendous, and everything beyond that, the Cult of Thorn. I mean, they got just so lost in the weeds that I think starting from square one was still kind of a new concept cinematically for them, and it might have been hard to grasp. I don't know, but it's. I will say this about H2O going into it. This is probably the least scary Halloween movie there is. I wouldn't even put it in the genre of horror. I would put it in like thriller, suspense, drama, like in the same vein as like Untraceable or Eagle Eye. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't even look at it as a horror film because this was probably the least scary Michael Myers really was. And obviously there's some dumb scares in the franchise, but I don't know. As up to this point, 7 installments, 6 installments in, this is probably the least horror Michael Myers has ever been, at least for me. I mean, do you see what I'm getting at?
I do. I agree with you 100%. This is you know not many Halloween films scare you after you've seen them 500 times, but you know there's some there's not any great kills in this movie in my opinion. There's a couple that are creative but nothing that's really pops off the screen. It's not scary. The score went through hell. The guy that originally made the score, John Ottman, his score got completely erased and they replaced it with another score. There was all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. There's what, 4 different masks in this movie. That's a record. And none of them, well, I'll take that back. Most of them aren't good at all. And it's not scary. I like this movie for this truly feels like a Laurie movie, and not the type where it's like, oh, look, it's Laurie Strode, you need to come back and watch
Yeah.
the movie. It felt like a definitive end, a good 20-year later gap in the story. It made sense. They did it right, and I like the story in this film a lot better than I like some of the other ones. That's why I like it so much.
Yeah. This is a very Jamie Lee Curtis movie and nothing more. I mean, Loomis isn't in it. I mean, Donald Pleasance had passed away at this point. Every other character from the first movie is gone except for a cameo from the nurse. But it's very much a Jamie Lee Curtis movie, and I think when we're introduced to her in this movie, I think that can be a little off-putting for people because she's got the short hair, she's the tall mom figure, she's kind of a hard ass, you know her from the freaking Activia commercials, you know her from Freaky Friday at this point. It's a little like but she does a very good job delivering throughout the movie of reminding you who she is and her place in this story. So it's a very story driven and a very very where are they now, bringing you up to speed on this character from the first movie. And there's a severe lack of Loomis, obviously. But some of the other characters are a little more compelling than I think we saw in the last two sequels. Other than Jamie, I think this one's got some good characters that were introduced.
Yeah, you get Molly Williams, Michelle Williams, you get Josh
Mhm.
Hartnett. I mean, you get some some at the time, through the course of the couple of years, I mean, they were A-list actors. They were up there, and a lot of them are still working. You get LL Cool J, which he will not be the last rapper introduced into this franchise, but he does not do a bad job. As a matter of fact, he's been in a lot of television, a lot of TV shows, so he's got some acting chops. He's not bad in this movie. And then also you have Jamie Lee
Yeah.
Curtis's mom. You have Janet Leigh, who was the star of Psycho. She doesn't play a big part in the movie, but she is in it. It's a cool nod. So I think in terms of star power and in terms of like acting ability, you get some, you're probably going to get the best you're going to get out of the whole franchise, I would say.
Yeah, at least they definitely focus more on the side characters. Michael Myers, I think, is not in the spotlight in this movie, and whether that does the movie a disservice or not has yet to be seen. But yeah, it's definitely got some big names behind it. Josh Hartnett was obviously popping off at the time. The Faculty with him came out the same year, and ironically, I don't know if it's just because it's him, but this movie reminds me a lot of The Faculty. Like I was watching, and I was like, man, this kind of reminds me of The Faculty. Oh wait, Josh was in it. You know, I don't know. That might have just been me in the whole school setting, but yeah, I kind of got the same filmmaking vibe.
Yeah, it definitely is very reminiscent of The Faculty, as well as being in school with Josh Hartnett, and that's a movie we will get to. It's a very solid sci-fi horror movie. I like that. So let's dive
Mhm.
into it here. We're going to start with who we always start with, Michael Myers. And what I'm going to say,
Of
I
course.
feel like most people will agree with, but there are some people who might disagree. To me, this is the worst Michael Myers in the entire franchise. It is the worst. You've got the
What?
worst. You
Really?
have the worst masks, and you have the worst portrayal of Michael. Michael, to me, looks like he went to Target and bought the $20 costume of himself and then walked on set in this film.
Real? Even more so than 4 or 5?
Yes, I think four is the portrayal is bad, and the mask I've learned to live with, but at least four, I like five. I like five's mask, and I like the portrayal, the movements of the character. I think Chris Duran was the guy who played Michael in this film, which is really weird because he played Ghostface in the original Scream. And in that, he looks like a completely different actor. I don't know if it's because Ghostface is more like agile and runs around a lot, and he does different stuff. Michael is just a slow walking killer.
Technical difficulty there, but what this man just said was that this is the worst depiction of Michael Myers out of 13 movies. That is actually super surprising to me. Yeah, it's not the best, but I kind of see what you're saying with the costume. I think it goes back to it not being centered on Michael as much as some of the other installments. Um, I'm shocked to hear you say that, though. I thought for sure there would be worse iterations of Michael Myers in this series.
I so let me explain just a little bit. So there's four masks in this movie. In the beginning scene where he breaks into um, the nurse's house from Halloween 1 and 2, um, they actually use the Halloween 6 mask at one of the scenes in there. If you go back and watch it, you'll see it. It's very quick, but they do use that in the first couple shots in the movie, which looks good because I like the Halloween 6 mask.
Yeah,
But
it
I
was
understand,
good.
yeah, but I understand, it's their movie. They want to use a different mask, whatever. So then they go and use this one mask where it's in a couple of the like far away shots, It just is like he looks like an alien almost. It's not scary. It's very like the late 90s, 2000s look, which is not bad. I mean, it is bad. It's really bad. And then you've got the one scene where they CGI the mask. Listen, I know that they tore down the set. They needed to go do a reshoot, and they just there was nothing they can do. They got put in a pinch, so they CGI it. It looks so bad. It's so bad. And then you get to the mask that they use for most of the film with all the reshoots, the close-up shots. The mask itself isn't terrible, but the eye holes are this big. I mean, Michael looks like
Yeah.
he's doing this the whole movie. It's not scary. His hair is so late 90s. He looks like he has an afro almost. And
Yeah.
just Chris Duran, like I was saying before we got cut off, he played the original Ghostface in Scream, the first one, and he did a killer job in that movie. I don't know if it's because Michael is a like slow walker in the film as opposed to Ghostface who runs around. It looked awkward. At least George P. Wilbur's like it was awkward, but like it was kind of laughably. Like it was so bad, it was funny. This film, they were actually trying, and it just sucked.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. The eye holes was the most noticeable thing about it to me. I mean, uh, people who don't really like pay attention, they won't see the issue with the eye holes, but I mean, try to imagine like if Batman didn't have the black eye paint around under his mask. You'd see a lot of his skin around here between the eyebrow and the cheekbone, and it's just it it reminds you that he's an actor in a mask. And we're not even going to talk about the fact that his eyes should be damaged twice fold from the first and second movies because I'm tired of talking about that.
He's
They
tired
always
of it.
forget that. Tired of it, man. But like at this point, you've got to know that one of the strongest aspects of Michael Myers' mask is when it's completely black and you don't see any pupils. Come on, you didn't think to put like black Under Armour or something under the eye holes so the actor could see through it, but you couldn't see his eyes? I mean, CVS masks have that. Why couldn't you?
Yeah, they really had a tough time deciding on the mask here, and they royally messed up. And
Is it the worst mask in the series?
for for me, yes, it is.
Wow.
It's the worst.
Wow.
It's the reason I like this movie a lot. And this movie would be a grade or two higher for me if they did the mask right. But the mask is just so at least in H4, like they get the lighting right. At least there's a couple shots where they light it right and it looks, decent. It looks scary. In this movie, there is no dark lighting to cover Michael's eyes at all. You basically see his eyes the whole movie, and you see his eye sockets. You see everything. It's not scary, and that's what made this film not scary. Like you said, is you don't have a
Yeah.
menacing Michael Myers. I get it. The story's not really about him, but it just it you have to get Michael right. You have to get Michael right, and if you can't do that, then you're going to have a tough time making a Halloween film because he's the first thing that you have to get right.
It's the centerpiece. And we said it in the H4 interview. The mask was obviously a big gripe for Halloween 4. And even with my fan theory as to why that mask is okay, you still have to suspend your disbelief and you have to be willing to look past it. For some reason or other, I'm not willing to look past it this time.
No.
And I think part of that is because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we kind of just get dropped into the middle of Michael is back 20 years later. And I don't really see him like picking up a new mask from the store, breaking out of whoever's got him. He kind of just appears and just starts killing, like with no explanation where he's been in the last 20 years. Or did I miss something?
No, you're correct. There is no like an H4 where he kind of returns and goes to the store and grabs the mask. There is none of that. So he just kind of shows up and it's like, "Hey, I'm back." And everyone's like, "Oh shit, it's Michael Myers." And
Everyone's
that's
okay with it.
yeah, everyone just is like, "Okay, whatever." So he's been gone for 20 years. Maybe he's just picked up a mask somewhere and he was like, I'm just going to hold on to this whenever I feel like coming back. And that's kind of just what happened.
Yeah, I don't know where you're hiding for 20 years, but someone's bound to know where you are. And even then, like, no killing for 20 years. I mean, they even acknowledge the end of Halloween 2 in this. where Laurie's son was like, "You watched him burn up," and she was like, "I never saw what they did with the body," or whatever she said. So they acknowledge that there's a gap between Halloween 2 and this one, but there's a gap, like he wasn't locked up, he wasn't in a coma. Give us something.
I never really thought about that. Is that so? At the end of Halloween 2, they just show Michael kind of getting burned up, but they never show, the cops going to like find his body or going to, pick him up and put him in a body bag and take him away. There, it just kind of ends. So, I don't know if they, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but did they ever say like, does everyone know? Everyone knows that Michael has been missing for 20 years. They never found his body. So, or we just assume like he just was burning on the floor and then all of a sudden the cops got there and he's gone and they're like, oh shit, well, we don't know where he's at, or they lost him, they misplaced him. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, there's some kind of crime scene report that just has a gap in it, because obviously, let's pretend after the credits roll in Halloween 2 that Laurie leaves the hospital, she's helped out with the police or whatever. They go in there, they find Loomis's body, but no Michael Myers body. I mean, that's got to contradict with what Laurie was saying. And even if Laurie didn't say that, come on, the whole thing about Halloween 2 is they know about Michael Myers. So yeah, there's a gap in explanation there, and it's too great to suspend disbelief, at least for me. So you lose a couple points there with me.
Yeah, it's definitely a leap of faith, but whatever. So getting into the movie, essentially it starts off, we kind of start off pretty hot. The nurse, Nancy Stevens, she was looking over Dr. Loomis in his older age before he passed away. She was living with him, and he had all his files, all his life's work, all that stuff in this house. So she gets home from work one day and realizes that her house has been broken into. So she goes across the street and is like, hey, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, will you come please look at my house? And he does. And he goes in there, he doesn't find anything. And he says, wait till the cop, or she tells him before he goes in the house, wait till the cops get here. He goes in and looks, comes out, and then she says, okay, I guess I'm not going to wait for the cops, and then just goes in the house anyway. At this point, she still sees stuff is off. She runs across the street, sees that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has got a ski stuck in his face. That's not going to help. And then all of a sudden she runs into Michael and the cops get there. They're at the other house. She's in this house, and then he kills her, and he steals the car because Michael Myers likes to drive, and then he drives away.
He sure likes to drive. We've seen that.
He likes to drive, but he did have a mission. When he got to Nancy's house, he did find a file with Laurie Strode's information in it. So Dr. Loomis was keeping tabs on her. That's how he knows that she's moved away, changed her name. That's how he knows where to go, which is fine. So then, yeah, that's kind of how the film starts. It's very into it. I will say this. I do kind of enjoy the opening credit scene where they do the scan of like Loomis's room, and he's got like this his whole like wall in his room is just filtered with newspaper clippings and drawings and pictures of Michael and people getting killed. And it's like this crazy like conspiracy theory looking room, and it's kind of cool to look at. And then they even do a Loomis voiceover by some guy. It's not the worst, but I mean it's nice. It's nice to see that they acknowledge him and they know that he was a big part of the story.
Yeah, they definitely acknowledge the absence of Dr. Loomis without actually like milking it. I think that they involved him enough to where it's still respectful to Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, so they do a good job of that.
Mhm.
So then Michael takes off. He's got a long drive from Illinois to California. So essentially at this point, we get introduced to Laurie Strode, or excuse me, Carrie Tate is what she's known as in this film. And we realize that she's still having nightmares about Michael 20 years later, and that now she has a kid named John, who was played by Josh Hartnett. So, we get introduced to that dynamic, and we realize that on this day, it's October 31st, it's Halloween. So, she's on edge. And we see at this point, she's drinking a lot. She's taking medication. She's holding it together in front of everybody, but on the inside, she's still pretty tore up. And we see that they have this really bad relationship. Well, I wouldn't say bad, but they have a heated, a tumultuous relationship in terms of her being super controlling and him being like the 17-year-old that's like, I'm ready to live my life, mom. Let me go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And now another reason I can't suspend my disbelief is you can never ever convince me in 1,000 years that Josh Hartnett is the son of Jamie Lee Curtis. You'll never convince me of that. But I'll look past it this time. But yeah, no, they've got like a strained relationship because obviously she's paranoid that Michael's going to come back, and for good reason too. And Josh just turned 17 a couple months prior, and that's the age that Laurie was attacked at, which I got to talk about because there's an error here. So Laurie says she's attacked at 17, and that's like a big like why she knows he's back because Michael also killed his older sister when she was 17. So 17 is a big deal in this movie. If Laurie was attacked when she was 17, and that was in 1978, that means she was born in 1961. So Michael made his first kill when he was 7. So that means Michael was born in 1956, I believe, somewhere along this. I know it gets choppy. It's hard to decipher, but I had to look it up. Michael was born in like 1956. Anyways, even if I have the numbers wrong, there's some kind of overlap with this timeline that proves that Laurie was a baby when Michael made his first kill. That Laurie was in the house. So there's some kind of discrepancy there. I got to go back and Google it because I know I got my years wrong, but I noticed it right away that her timeline of her being 17 in 1978 mixed up with the timeline established of Michael's first kill in like the first movie or two. So there's some kind of overlap there. I don't know. I just thought that was more interesting than anything. But yeah, there's some kind of discrepancy there, and it'd be fun to go and look it up again.
Yeah. So Michael, I'm trying to find it online. I'll have to look it up later. I know he is 6 years old. He makes the first kill, but yeah, she would be a very young mother.
Yeah.
So, anyways, 17 is a big deal in this film, because he later does get the card from his dad saying, "Hey, happy birthday, 17 years old." We don't find out who the dad is. It's not Ben Tramer. He's dead.
Yeah, we know that. We know that for sure.
Maybe in an alternate timeline, it's Sheriff Hawkins from the new movies. Who knows?
Yeah, there's so many holes in this continuity. I wouldn't be surprised.
You never know. So essentially, she's the principal of this private academy, this high school, and they're going on a big trip to Yosemite, and he's really bummed because his mom is like, "No, you can't go. I need you here." And then he's like, "Mom, I'm trying to go. I'm 17," and he wants to hang out with his girlfriend and her friends and go out and have fun. And she's telling him no. So they're pretty bummed. Turns out that none of them can really even go. His girlfriend in the film, played by Michelle Williams, is her financial aid gets messed up or something, so she can't go. And then the other two, they don't want to go because they're not going. They just want to stay back and have sex. So the four main characters of the group end up staying. And essentially at this point, Michael is just on his way to find them and to recreate what he did 20 years ago.
Yep, he's making a trek, and he could not have better timing because the whole school is off at Yosemite except for the important main characters. So he's making making his way from Illinois to California. He steals a car from like a mother and child who are making a pit stop somewhere along the way, and he drives the whole way, and he gets to campus eventually. And Laurie's, of course, a big chunk of this movie. I'm going to say a good 45 minutes. There's not a single kill. It's really just reestablishing Laurie's PTSD, the relationship with the son, all decent storytelling, and her attempts at a new love life. But there's like a 45 minutes with no action whatsoever.
Yeah. She Well, they do a pretty good job of that. And I like the fact that they tried to go back to the original concept, for a good majority of the original film. I mean, yeah, there are some kills here and there that are off screen or things that you don't see, but it's really focusing on the story and trying to just low key build suspense, and it's fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. I think they do a good job of that. So I did notice that the first time I saw Halloween 2018 in the theater, when Michael breaks into the bathroom to kill the podcasters, I was like, that is from H2O. And watching
Yeah,
this movie, I get
mhm.
it every time, and I like that. It's a nice little callback.
It's
Um,
one of those many things that they borrowed from H2O that a lot of people don't realize. It's like they took the best things from H2O and they put it in 2018 and they just did it again.
Correct. So Michael says, I don't really like this car. It's not nice enough. I need to drive this military looking vehicle around. So he steals their car, and he makes his way to whatever it is, whatever city it is in California. And so LL Cool J in this film is he's the
Gate
security
guard.
guard that works
Yeah.
up there, and he's half-time security guard, half erotic novelist.
Aspiring erotic
Aspiring
novelist.
erotic novelist, and he's reading these lines to his girlfriend on the phone or whatever, and it's fine. It's not terrible, but it's not funny. I mean, it's whatever. And essentially, he doesn't really do a very good job. And then Josh Hartnett comes up to him. He's like, "Man, I need to sneak out. Just let me out." And he's like, "No, you get me in trouble when you go out." He's like, "Please." He's like, "Okay, fine." And then he sneaks out. And then he gets caught by his mom when she's having lunch with one of her love interests and the counselor. And throughout these first couple scenes, we get a couple shots of her looking into windows or looking out somewhere, and we see where Michael is like appearing, and it's her having like a little episode or a vision that he's there, and then she closes her eyes, opens, and he's gone.
Yeah, and they did a good job of not only paying homage to the first classroom sequence, looking out the window and seeing him, but like the idea of like, is he there? Is he not there? Like, is she imagining it? So that was good because it's easy but good. Um, One of the things I liked was the classroom sequence where she's teaching, she's giving a lecture. And in the first movie, one of the big deals is like the lecture that Laurie Strode is sitting in on is a lesson about like fate and how people are destined to end up, crossing paths or whatever the lesson is. But the lesson that you listen to, if you hear closely, it foreshadows the movie, right?
Correct.
So the lesson given by Laurie to Michelle Williams in this classroom is about think it's about Frankenstein, where
Yes.
it's about someone who can't keep running from the monster, has to eventually stand up and face the monster, otherwise they'll never get out of it. And that's a nice little callback there. And it also kind of knocks a little bit of sense into Laurie Strode, where you start to see like the wheels start turning. She's like, "Oh, I got to deal with this." So I like that. I appreciate that sequence.
Yeah, and then you also have the scene where Michelle Williams looks out the classroom and then sees Michael staring as the same way that Laurie did. So that's a nice little callback, and they do a nice job with that. And they do another job of that in H18, where Allison looks out the window and sees Laurie. So they will have no shortage of that on any of the Halloween films. Give me 1 second here. So every time, what is going on here? There we go. So getting into it, there's we get the scene where she runs into her mom who's works there, and she's Janet Leigh. She's from Psycho. It's a cool little nod there. And Laurie just gets kind of worked up about everything. So eventually she decides that, what, I'm gonna let John go. I'm gonna let him go on this trip to Yosemite, not knowing that he's already made up his mind that he's not going. He's staying behind with everybody else. So all the kids take off and they stay behind, and Laurie and her love interest, they stay back. And essentially Michael finally makes his way there. He pulls up to the gate and he kind of tricks LL Cool J in a way, and then he gets in, and Michael is officially made his way into the academy. And at this point he finally starts to make some kills. we get to the one scene where he kills the one kid that's in the friend group, where they do a clever job where he loses the corkscrew down the dish disposal, and everybody's like, oh shit, he's gonna get his hand stuck in there, and Michael's gonna cut on the button, it's gonna mess him up. Well, he doesn't do that, and he pulls it out, and then he turns around to see a guy wearing a CGI mask.
Yeah, so really what he saw was a guy, and we saw a CGI mask. So yeah, it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment. I don't get why. I mean, come on. Like, I can go down to Walmart and get a Michael Myers mask right now. You're telling me in reshoots you couldn't get one? Really? In the 90s? Come on. I don't know why they.
Yeah,
I guess they were starting to feel ambitious. They're like, "Oh, technology's progressing. We can start putting CGI in Michael Myers movies." It's like, don't do that. Don't need it. Don't do that.
you're not there yet. So essentially, at that point, Michael makes his first kill. He kills the kid with the corkscrew, and then a few minutes later, his girlfriend goes looking for him, and then we finally get I would say a pretty decent kill where there's a lot of suspense building up, where she gets in the I'm not sure what to call it, but she gets in the thing that goes up in the
Like a
kitchen,
laundry chute or
like
something.
there's a specific word for it, I can't think of it. And Michael comes up and she sees her boyfriend, he's in it, so she hops in it, tries to go up there, and she's getting out, and Michael is below her, and he cuts the rope, and the thing comes down on her leg and kind of like cuts it in half. It's pretty gruesome. And then he comes upstairs and just puts his foot on her neck and just stabs her, and I was like, okay, I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Finally getting into some action now that all the lovey-dovey soap opera drama is done. So we're finally getting into some action. So they're killed off. They were pretty one-dimensional, anyways. And then is that the point where Michael runs into Josh Hartnett?
So they go end up, so Michelle Williams and Josh Hartnett, I know that's not their names in the movie, but that they go looking for their two friends, and then they see all this blood everywhere, and then we get a pretty decent shot of Michael with his craft skills, where he hangs up the girl and has like the light kind of inside her, and when
Yeah.
they see that, then Michael's just in the corner, and they see him. They're like, oh shit. So they run away. And then at that point, we actually get a pretty decent scene, which I don't remember really seeing in any of the other films. I'm not sure why, but they're running. And then Michael just kind of like jumps out of the bushes and just like stabs Josh Hartnett in the leg. And then
Yeah.
he's kind of on him. And then he gets hit in the head with the rock, and then they run away. And that's when we get the scene where you've got Laurie and the other guy. They're over there. They start to realize that some stuff's kind of going on. And I guess it's important to mention that before that happened, Laurie is with I can't think of the character's name. I know his real name is Adam Arkin. He's the actor. So
The
she's
guidance
with him.
counselor?
Yes, the counselor. So they're together in like Laurie's apartment or house or whatever, and then she's starting to tell him, the real story about what happened, and he's like, "Oh my god, I had no idea. Like I had an idea, but I didn't know it was this deep. This is crazy." And she's had a couple drinks, and then um, you know, she starts to kind of get upset, and then the phone lines are down, and she doesn't know if they made it there yet. And then LL Cool J shows up. He's like, "Yeah, there's a car up front. We don't know who's in it." And she's like, "Oh shit, here we go. It's starting to happen." So at that point, Josh Hartnett and his crew running over there. She's over there. They run into each other and get this cool scene where they run into each other and they slam the door. And then we get the scene where Michael was standing through the door, the glass, and he looks in. She looks at her, and it's the mask is terrible, but it's a pretty cool looking scene. I do like that scene.
Yeah, it's a nice. You definitely felt the weight of the scene where Laurie and Michael finally make eye contact through the porthole. You felt it. It was a build up to it, and
Correct.
even though it wasn't dwelled on a lot in that shot, you felt the impact. Laurie or Jamie Lee Curtis did a very good job acting, and I think you can almost kind of piece together Michael's interpretation of seeing her face. Like you can feel it. That's a scene you can feel, and I got no complaints about that scene.
Yeah. So they do a good job there, and kind of like we mentioned in some of the 4, 5, and 6, where there were some points where we didn't really care. I feel like in this movie, the story is good and the acting is good, and it really makes me root for Laurie as opposed to rooting for Michael, because a lot of these sequels, you get into it where you start rooting for Michael because you don't care about anybody. But in
Right.
this movie, I actually was kind of rooting for Laurie. I didn't want to see Michael win. I didn't, and I hated his mask, so I wanted him to die.
Yeah, exactly. It just goes to show that like don't skimp out on developing your side characters and your protagonists of the movie. Like Halloween 4 did a great job. You care about the characters. You don't want to see them die. Halloween 5 and 6, you don't really care. And if they die, it better be cool. But this time around, like Laurie is a character that we care about. Her son, I think, was developed enough to where you actually feel some kind of depth to them. So you actually
Right.
care about these characters more than just wanting to see cool kills like on Friday the 13th. So yeah, no, you have to flesh out your characters. I know that I said there's a 45-minute stint with no action in this movie, but people are so invested in this. Like this is the third in the series. 20 years later, where are they now? Spend the time, develop them. It'll make the third act conflict hit so much harder.
Correct, which it does, and they do a good job of developing the characters. Quick note: the director of this film was Steve Miner, and he actually went on to direct, or before he directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. So he
Mm.
does have roots in horror, and he's directed a bunch of other films. I mean, he's got some stuff that's hit or miss, but he's directed a lot of horror films. So they brought him in, so he kind of had an idea of what was going on.
Yeah, he gets it.
So at this point, they're running around, and all of a sudden, Adam Arkin, he thinks he sees Michael, but really he shoots LL Cool J. And it's funny because if you really watch it close and you watch the scene where Michael comes across the corner, it's clearly him. If you pause it and look, it's him. And then they cut
Mhm.
it back to Adam Arkin having the gun, and then you turn back when he shoots him, and it's LL Cool J. So they try to do a little fake out there, but I saw it. It didn't get it past me.
Yeah, I think that was one of their. That might have been one of their continuity errors. Well, you know what? I wouldn't even say that's an error. That seems way too intentional from a directing standpoint. That seems way too intentional. I think what they were trying to do is that callback to that scene about 10, 15 minutes prior where Laurie sees Michael walk in. She's like
Yeah.
trying to blink him away, trying to see if he's a hallucination, and it turns out he is. I think that might have been a callback to that. Like, is that really him, or are we just seeing things? But didn't really translate the way maybe the screenplay had it. But it was intentional. That was for
Yeah,
sure.
I agree. So at that point, they're like, "Oh my god, I accidentally shot LL Cool J," and then all of a sudden, Michael appears, and then he stabs the counselor in the back, and then he's doing the thing up in the air, and he's dead. So then
Yep.
we start to get the what we came to see. We know this is Michael versus Laurie, okay, and we're getting ready to see it again. In later films. But for the first time in a long time, this is the first time you're really going to get to see them two go against each other. So then Laurie's doing the callback. She's telling the kids to go hide, and she's putting them in the closet. And then it's her and Michael. They're going at it. She does a couple good scenes where she's stabbing him and things like that, and he gets his stuff in there. Some good suspense, and then eventually we get this one scene where um, basically she stabs Michael a bunch of times, and then he falls off the balcony, falls over on the table, and crashes down. And he's knocked out. He's dead, I guess. So she goes down there, and she picks up the knife like she's gonna kill him. And I'm like, yes, this is what you want to see. You want to see the final girl finally say, you know what? I'm not gonna assume that he's dead. I'm gonna know he's dead. And before she can do it, LL Cool J, somehow surviving shots to the head, shows up and says, "Don't stab him. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead."
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, movie. He's alive, whatever. But one of the things that we said in the last review or the review prior is like no one double taps, no one makes sure that he's actually dead. They just assume and they run away, like they hit and run, and they never actually see him die. Even Laurie herself in this movie said she didn't see the body get carried away. So, like, I don't feel like she'd be talked out of it as easily. I feel like she'd want us to make sure that he was dead. So that's a kind of a sin to me.
Yeah. I mean, I get why, but it's just it's irritating.
It makes the ending hit harder. I'll give it
It
that.
it does. It does. So at that point, everything's fine. Michael is dead and they survive. The paramedics, the cops show up. And she also didn't mention at this point that they had a chance to essentially escape almost. And they get in the car and Laurie says, you know what? No, I gotta stay. I gotta fight this guy. So Josh Hartnett and his girlfriend, they take off in the car, and Laurie, that's when she gets that one-on-one with Michael. So, like we
Mhm.
said, the callback to the scene before earlier when they were in the classroom talking about facing your fears, that's what she has to do. So that's when she gets into it with Michael and they're going at it. So after that, when he's dead, the paramedics, the cops show up, they save the day. Laurie just out of the blue, I love the scene. She just says, screw it, grabs the axe, grabs a cop's gun. She's like, put him in the car, give me the keys. I'm driving away with this man. And that's what she does. It's kind of a badass move. I really, really liked it.
Yeah, yeah, she's making sure the job gets done. It's a nice play for the character. It really shows like she's losing it, like she's obsessing over this. So that's a really nice play. I really wouldn't have done it any other way than her like taking matters in her own hand and literally stealing the body away to make sure it's dealt with once and for all. I like it.
Correct. So at that point, she's driving away and she keeps looking back at the body bag while she's driving. He's moving, and whenever she looks away, he's not moving and all this and that. Eventually, she sees that he comes out of the body bag, which she knew he was still alive. And then he gets up, he tries to grab her in the driver's seat. She hits the brakes, he flies through the windshield, rolling over, kind of similar to Halloween 4 in a way. And, she's telling him to get up, get up. And he gets up, he stands up, and then just like Halloween 4, she smashes right into him, except this time she's still driving. And I love the ending, but this part always cracks me up. How she drives off the cliff in this van going like 60 miles an hour. Michael somehow stays latched onto it, flying down. She's able to escape the van while it's rolling downhill, pretty much unscathed. And she's very lucky. And then at the same time, Michael somehow gets caught between a tree and the bus impales him, and his body does not smash into a billion pieces. He just kind of has like a little mini episode, and then he lays there.
Yeah, that's a very, very that's a Hail Mary, man. I mean,
I mean, what are the odds?
the absolute odds to get impaled in that position with your upper body available and still be alive. Okay, I get it. Climax of a movie and that's it, but okay, whatever. Hey, we finally have him trapped. Lori has him right where she wants him, and they have this moment, this brother sister moment, because remember she is still his sister in this continuity.
Correct.
They have this moment of him like reaching out to her with his hand, and she almost like you think she feels sad about what she did?
I don't think, I mean, maybe a little, because at the end of the day, like, okay, first off, I got to back up real quick to that scene where she drove.
I can't get over
I,
that.
I can understand if maybe she drove into a tree and like they were just driving and she drove into a tree and he was impaled there. Maybe he could still kind of be alive, and she jumped out right before the tree hit. But to fall off that cliff like that, impossible. Anyways, I'm done. I'm done. Back to what you were saying. I think that she felt a little something because obviously, he's made her life living hell, and he's basically, the reason the way she is. But at the same time, there's probably that part of her, like, she never got to know him. She never got to see what he was like. She never really got to have that side of, even if there was a side before all this happened, she never really knew him, and she never got that chance to, you know, try to figure out why, try to have I'm not even going to say have a relationship, just try to have a knowledge of why. So there's a lot of unknowns. She just knows that her brother is just a killer and he's trying to kill her. And she doesn't really have a lot of answers why, but she has to go with what she knows. And that is to fucking kill him. And that's what she does. And she chops his head off. And I bet you the crowd in the theater probably got so hyped when that scene happened.
Yeah, man, that was pretty good. It was satisfying. It was built up in the right way. Finally paid off after 20 years of bad sequels. Laurie got her revenge and decapitated Michael Myers, and you know it to be true because his head rolled onto the ground. And looks at Laurie. She feels a sigh of relief. Cut to black. Halloween, as we know it, is over.
You know what? I have a theory. I think when at the very end when she was having a little moment where she like kind of grabs at his hands, I think she was thinking like, I'd let you live, but that mask is just so fucking bad. I can't deal with it.
She's
And,
probably just like, you know what?
and
You were better with the CGI.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
pretty much.
I wouldn't be shocked.
So
Yeah,
that is the end of Halloween H20 H20 Halloween water, whatever you want to call it.
like water.
Yeah, there's some bad stuff in this movie, but there's some good stuff. I feel like at the time, like in 1998, I feel like after this movie came out, I bet everybody was like, dude, that was the best Halloween movie. I feel like everybody was like, that was the perfect way to end it. I'm sure I'm gonna have to go back and look it up. I'm sure there are people that feel that way. When you saw that in the theaters that day, you're like, that was the perfect way to end the series. I'm a fan. I like it.
And it had to end. I mean,
Had to.
people at this point were like, "I'm tired of these bad sequels. I want to see some. I want to see some revenge. I want to see some payoff. I want to see him die for good." And I feel like there was so much fatigue at that point that they're glad that it wasn't just like a, "Oh, but did he really die though?" After like three
Correct.
of those movies, I feel like people were happy.
Correct. So I'm glad that at the time that's what they were going for. And so yeah, that's the end of H2O. A couple things we didn't really touch on. In this movie, there is pretty much little to no Halloween atmosphere. But I know that me and you like that in our Halloween films, and I'm pretty sure everyone does. But I
Hmm.
will say this, I feel like, in California where they were at in the summertime, or not in the summertime, late summer, early fall, you know, that atmosphere doesn't really call for like tons of Halloween pumpkins and lanterns and all this stuff. There's no Halloween atmosphere, but it, it seems like it's kind of okay with me in this movie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's a nice change of location. A lot of movies, a lot of threequels, change the location from the first two movies just to have that different atmosphere, add something new to the story, add some kind of um, visual, something memorable for visuals. Like when you think of this movie, you don't think of trick or treaters, you think of the school, you think of the school uniforms. So I feel like that's why they did that, to kind of distance themselves from it. But yeah, the lack of a Halloween aesthetic is is it probably a big reason why he's not really scary in this. And he's not scary in general because it's more of a drama. But yeah, I feel like that has something to do with it. Like if you told me this took place on freaking July 29th or anything like that, I believe you.
Yeah. So and this movie did come out in the summer, I believe. So this was
Uh,
a summer blockbuster that they were aiming for, which I understand, but Halloween films are best done, in the fall, in October.
I mean, it's in the title. Like, come on.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, what'd you think about the score in this movie?
It was nothing. I mean, it was very forgettable. Nothing really stood out to me. I mean, I was half expecting Blink 182 to come on at some point. I mean, it really didn't do anything for me. It's not. The score was nothing in this movie. I mean, yeah, there was iterations of the original Carpenter theme, but this wasn't really. This wasn't. This was less of a Halloween movie and more of just like a '90s Dimension Films box office flick. That's really what it was.
Right.
It just had more of that vibe to it, more of like a big, like you said, blockbuster, instead of the Halloween horror movie that we know. So I feel like that has a lot to do with it. But there's nothing memorable about the score for me in this. I can't remember a single sequence about it.
No, there isn't. This is probably one of the weaker scores in all of the films. It might even be the weakest, but if you listen to it, it's very like whimsical. It's like kind of lots of flutes and things like that. It really sounds like I'm not a music major, but you know what I'm talking about. It's very
Yeah,
like, you know, very like orchestra type fused in with Halloween. It's
typical
not,
movie score.
yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard, but in terms of Halloween, it doesn't really do it for me because we all love the
Yeah.
score. But I will say this is that at the end of this movie, when she chops his head off, they play the score and it does make it that much sweeter because you don't hear it at all in the movie until the very end. And then you're like, damn, I love that score.
Yeah, that's probably why they were skimping on it the whole movie, is to save it for the big impact. Because I think if they played it at every single scene, it wouldn't have mattered when they played it at the end. So I think that's probably why they were saving it. But if there's one thing more iconic than the mask, it's the score. So
Correct.
if you don't have one, at least have the other.
Correct. So that is the end of Halloween H2O. And this was the end of Michael Myers, right? There's no more movies, right?
That's it, man. They can finally rest in peace. We come to a close. We can rest our heads knowing that this this train has stopped in its tracks and we've arrived at our destination.
That's right. There are no more reviews to go in this series.
Oh
So,
man, it felt good to reach this point. Whew.
oof, thank goodness. Um, just kidding. Anyways, Jeff, H2O. What are you grading H2O? What are you giving it?
I gave the first one an A+, give the second one a C, give the fourth one an A-, give the fifth one a D, the sixth one a D-. Like I said in the beginning, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this movie. It's definitely the least scary and the least like the original any of the other ones, because it's more of a thriller and less of a horror. So yeah, it's lacking in some areas that made it so magical, but I care about the characters. It's shot like a decent 90s movie, like The Faculty, or like any other 90s horror movie, like Scream or Final Destination or anything like that. Yeah, it looks good. It's fun. It's compelling. I am actually interested in what the characters have to say when you go on a 45-minute stint without action. So, I not the best, obviously, but I enjoy it, and I watch it over some of the other ones. I think I enjoy it more than Halloween 2, which is a big deal. So, I'm gonna give this, all things considered, I'm gonna give this one. It doesn't feel right giving it a B-. I'm gonna give it a C+, and that's a good thing.
Man, me and you were right there. I'm sitting here while you're talking, teetering between a B minus and a C plus.
Ah,
I am also going to go with a C plus on this film. I think if they had gotten the mask right, this easily could have been a B plus. I really do. It's a solid entry in the series. You get characters that you care about. You get a good enough story for a Halloween film. The location is different. Is it the best? No, but hey, it's different. They tried something different. They didn't get Michael right, unfortunately, and to me, that's what knocks it down a couple pegs. Because if they had gotten Michael right, I would be a bigger fan of this film. But they didn't, and that's okay. But it is what it is. I'm going to give Halloween H2O a C plus. Um, so, with that being said, this is the end of this review, but this is not the end of the Halloween franchise because after this movie, there's another one, Halloween Resurrection, which has been called by many to be the best film in the franchise, according to me.
yes, very memorable, especially for fans of Kung Fu, and Buster Rhymes. Not so much for fans of Halloween or Michael Myers, but we'll get into that. It's I wish that they stopped. I wish they stopped. I really wish they did, but they didn't. The money's too good, and obviously it's got to continue somehow, even with no head, which we will figure out in the next one. But we still haven't gotten to the worst. We still haven't gotten to the worst movies.
That
got to get to them.
That would have been a good concept. A headless Michael Myers.
Yes, it would have made more sense.
just a quick fact before we get out of here. So if anyone that is ever confused by the fact that H2O is the ending, how do they make another film with Michael Myers in it? I'm not going to explain the why. I will save that for how it happens for the next review. But Mustafa Akkad, who was the producer, Trancas Films, who was the head of this whole thing, Michael Myers was essentially his baby, and he has gone on record by saying he wanted like 22 Halloween films, like some number like that. So there was no way that Michael Myers was going to definitively die. So before they started on this film, Jamie Lee Curtis came back, and they originally wanted John Carpenter, but he wanted a lot of money, and they said no. So he said, okay, I'm not going to do it. So they went with a different director. They still got Jamie Lee Curtis back. She wanted this to be the final film. I think a lot of people wanted this to be the final film, but she signed on knowing that there was going to be a sequel. Now, a lot of people have given her crap saying like, okay, you said you wanted this to be the final film, but you knew it wasn't the final film when you signed on to do it. In her defense, I will say that in probably her mind and a lot of people's mind, this was a definitive end. And if they wanted to make another sequel, that's fine. You can just kill me off or not put me in it. Well, she is in the next film, but not for long. So that kind of explains that.
Yeah, we will definitely get into it next time around. Boy, I am just chomping at the bit to get Halloween Resurrection watched and ready for this review, man. I'm just replaying in my head right now, and I said, oh boy, here it comes.
I will also say a quick fact. This was I'm pretty sure this was the first Halloween movie I ever saw was Halloween Resurrection, just because of my age, just because how young I was. I think my grandma owned this on VHS for some reason, and I just was like, oh, it's Halloween, Michael Myers. I don't know anything else about the other movies, but hey, I've got this one VHS. I'm going to watch it. So I've seen Resurrection a lot, and I'm not going to say it's good because it's not, but it always has held just a small, tiny place in my heart just because it was the first one I ever watched.
Everyone's got a Halloween movie that they grew up with. For me, it was For most of our generation above us, it was the original. For some unlucky children, it was Resurrection, but we're not judging.
We're not judging here. So
everyone's got the one they grew up with. So let's just see what this has to offer. I'm excited for it.
That's right. So thank you guys for watching Every Horror Film, sticking with us on our Halloween franchise review series. Follow us on Instagram, Every Horror Film, Horrors Forever. We will see you Halloween Resurrection.
The mummy has now been located.
The living mummy. The living mummy.
Bullets won't stop.
Some creature out of time.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
He's completely out of control.
I saw those bodies.
Is he a man or a monster?
You actually knew a werewolf in a peaceful town where nothing ever happened.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
In the mystical regions of Transylvania.